Hello and welcome back to the channel. We're sitting about 40 degrees today outside and we have an overcast day, so we don't have a whole lot of activity going on. Our water's flowing right now, but it is intermittent because we don't have a whole lot of solar activity, so our battery stores, and then our pump will push the hot water through our floor and back into our overflow for a few minutes at a time, and then it will shut off as it recharges the system. Our compost is only sitting about 80 degrees right now, so it is barely active and it is putting just a little bit of heat into this system. We kind of burnt our system out because we pushed a lot of water at a high rate through quite a bit of copper for the size of pile. We used about 4 wheelbarrows for this compost, and I can turn this, and I'm going to. It just takes a little bit of maneuvering because I have this copper coil coiled up through this whole entire pile long ways, so I have to pull all of that apart gently without breaking my system. Jean Pain himself was able to heat groundwater to the temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit or about 60 degrees Celsius at the rate of about 4 liters per minute. Now, we didn't achieve the results I was hoping for, but it was to be expected. We didn't use a nearly large enough compost pile. When building a large compost heating system, you need a large compost pile to hold that thermal mass and be able to produce heat while still cook the pile and hold that heat inside it without dissipating it by pulling all of that heat off by transferring it to the water inside. I really used about 30 feet of copper coil, but I have all of this exposed copper, so I'm only counting about 25 feet, which is actually conducting heat and transferring it to water. So I was able to get my compost up to about 135 or 140 degrees, about 57 degrees Celsius. And at the peak of heating of this compost pile, we were able to achieve about 90 to 92 degrees Fahrenheit water flowing through and back into our overflow tank from about 50 to 55 degree water. Now, this was a great experiment for our large greenhouse, and I wanted to get my hands dirty building this and kind of running it, so next winter I know exactly what I got to do and how to do it. So I'll be using about 100 feet or so of copper tubing. If I can acquire it, I may have to buy it, but it will be well worth it because I will be able to use it many times over. And with 100 feet of copper tubing and a really large compost pile out back, I will be able to exceed my heating needs, and I will be able to bring the water up to 140 degrees and continuously produce that throughout our entire winter here. So I've been using all the extra warmth in here to kind of harden off all our tomatoes. We got some of our tomatillos that have been in here a little longer than our tomatoes. We're sitting about 42 degrees outside today, and it's about 69 degrees in the greenhouse. Our compost is definitely cooling off. It's down to about 70 there, so we are definitely transferring more energy to this system than we were earlier because we have a little bit more sunlight, so it is actually drawing heat off of the pile and putting it into the water. I did not monitor this water today for temperature this morning, and starting temps were sitting about 57 degrees and we're sitting about 56.9. So there's really not a whole lot of difference in that right now, but our pile did cool from 80 to 75. So we are transferring something to that, but it's probably being lost in our entire floor. And I wanted to show everybody kind of all of the stuff I got going on. I laid a little bit of black tarping. We've got all of our beets coming up here, all of our spinach bouncing back to life with lots of new sprouts coming up in between them. Took the cover off our little pine trees. I made this little shade cloth for now. I need to order a large shade cloth, and being a 50-foot greenhouse, 52 feet, I'm looking at spending a decent amount of money. Bootstrap Farmer was about $200-ish plus shipping, or I could get 2 25-footers off of Amazon and they would not be near the quality. They might only last a season or two, so I'm still up in the air on that. If anyone watching this has any experience with the Bootstrap Farmer greenhouse shade cloths, definitely let me know your feedback in the comments below. I believe it's a very good brand. Most of his stuff is great quality, but I may try and cheap out and just throw a cheap shade cloth over this as we're getting the second layer on here if the rain ever quits. We have been dealing with constant rain for days, and I'm looking at getting some type of gutter system where I can harvest all the rain that's washing off the outside of my greenhouse also, so I can kind of harvest that or retain it or build some type of little retention pond for watering purposes and for growing plants, possibly aquatic plants, some watercress, anything edible or useful. So we made it down to the southern side of our greenhouse, and I wanted to show this little area here. Now we've got our loop here, and it comes right up and banks against these little tomatillos. And these are the pineapple ground cherries. Already throwing off little flowers because it's been out here for about a week and a half now. So all of these tomatoes here, I kind of clustered them close together, and I made a makeshift shade cloth for them so they didn't get absolutely burnt up. I hardened them off for about 3 days to 4 days out here in the shady parts before I brought them over here to plant right in the ground. With the combination of warmer weather and our compost heater running for the last week and a half here at full max, we've had some good heat retention on these bricks, and I can definitely see a lot of life popping up on the top side of these bricks. And up on this side, our hose is buried. You can kind of see it coming out of the dirt right here. It's right up along our lettuces, and these were pretty stagnant for quite some time, but they seem to be really coming on now. All these mixed radishes, everything's popping up and springing to life on us. All this mustard tatsoys, some other mustards. We've got some lovage coming up here. This is a perennial. This is like perennial celery, but it is super potent stuff. Very good for you. All this sorrel made it through the winter. I was worried because it had gotten transplanted about 6 months ago or so. This seems to be bouncing back to life very well, and that's a good harvest too. That sorrel's very good for you. And I want to show one more little thing here before I let everybody go. We've got our rhubarb. We had this covered. I had a little flower pot over top of this to kind of force it on and keep it a little bit more insulated and a little warmer, so it kind of forced that on, and rhubarb will grow basically in the dark. So covering this with a dark pot will not affect it. You can see this rhubarb got pulled up, and it's just hanging on by 2 little roots buried back in there. And you can see some of our overwintering plants have started to flower, so I'm going to save seed from that purple tatsoi and our mustard and arugula down there. So overall, this John Payne compost heating system worked flawlessly, other than the fact that I didn't build my compost big enough. That seems to be the issue because I have a limited amount of space in this greenhouse. Next time I bring an update out here, this should be decently full with potted plants. That's kind of why I laid this down. I'm just going to leave myself a path, and I may designate an area in here to put potted plants on for my market and kind of keep them sheltered in here early in the season here, when we still have definitely freezing nights ahead of us, and we've had some freezing nights recently. So keeping these tomatoes alive inside here, just keeping them kind of packed up against our thermal bank and our compost, just keeping them a little bit warmer. So I want to thank everybody for watching these videos and checking out our greenhouse and how we are heating it in the late winter, early spring.